Out of the Attic on 91 FM has all of your favorite old-time songs in one place. Hear music from Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Dinah Shore, and many more. Join Nathan Randall from 6 to 8 p.m. for an evening drive down memory lane, only on 91 FM.
What was the music scene like before rock and roll really became big? That the segment after the crooners and into the early to mid 50s, for you guys at least.
Well, you know, Nathan, it's quite interesting, and we've been cited before by musicologists and music historians as one of the what they call the transitional groups, where when we first started to record, the Four Aces and the Four Lads and those groups, would four of them stand up in tuxedos in front of one single mic with a big band of 20 or 22 pieces behind them that would accompany them, and that's how they'd perform. So there was no such thing as a four-man vocal group standing up with guitars, playing the guitars or playing other instruments. They just four of them stood there in front of a single mic and sang. So we were part of the transition from that big band sound behind the groups of the day to a smaller, slightly more rock-oriented sound, which is what 26 Miles had. And the perfect example of how we were doing both kinds of music as a transitional group, that was the backside, the B-side of 26 Miles, is Billy May's band with about 22 pieces. It's a big swinging brass band on the backside. On the front side, there's four musicians playing behind us on 26 Miles. So we were kind of part of that transition from the big band into self-contained groups or groups with more rhythm section behind them, you know, drums and guitar and bass and so forth, that came along as rock and roll began to happen.
And Bruce, I found from doing a little bit of research that you have a connection with the Sinatra family.
Yeah. Well, we tried, when we wrote 26 Miles, we tried desperately to get Capitol to take it seriously and let us record it, and they just kept saying, look, Perry Como and Eddie Fisher and Patti Page, they don't write their songs. The songwriters write songs. You guys are singers. You're not songwriters. Forget it. We'll find a song for you. We'll find a hit. Well, after we did 2 or 3 more releases and still didn't have a hit, I said, please, would you listen to 26 Miles? And our producer just wouldn't take it seriously. Then Nancy Sinatra, who I was dating at the time, she went to a school on the west side of town called University High. She and her girls' club from Uni High rented a couple of motel rooms down in Palm Springs for the spring break and invited us all to come down. So we all got our guitars and our ukuleles and drove down to Palm Springs and slept all night in Glenn's car. And then during the day, we'd hang around the swimming pool with all the girls and teach them songs and sing and have fun. So we taught them 26 Miles along with a lot of other songs that we liked to play. And about 2 weeks later, I was back in L.A., and I ran into Nancy. She was waiting in line to go to a movie we were going to see. And she said, oh, God, it's so great to see you. We had so much fun in Palm Springs. When are you guys going to record that great song? We can't stop singing it. I said, well, we did a lot of songs down there. Which one are you talking about? She said, oh, that Catalina song. We're making up harmony parts. We just love it. Well, now I had some ammunition, so now I went back to Capitol to our producer, just about pounded on his desk and said, look, Frank Sinatra's daughter likes this song. All the girls in her club like this song. They're already singing it. Please let us record it. So he finally relented and let us record it. And so Nancy, I've always told her, I owe her a huge favor on that one, because she was the one that really talked me into fighting for the song.
So while dating her, how nerve-wracking or nervous were you at all? Dating the daughter of the chairman of the board.
Yeah, you sound like you know Frank's reputation. Oh, she was great. I'd go pick her up at her house, but of course, she didn't live with her dad. Her dad and her mom had been divorced for some time, so in her teens, she had lived with her mom and her brother and sister in a very nice house near the campus, and I'd go over and pick her up, and we'd go out to a drive-in or roller skating or something like that. I never encountered her father in that fatherly role of a girl I was dating. I encountered him a lot at Capitol in recording sessions and in the elevator at the tower or, something like that. But there was never any fatherly problems when I was dating her.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. You didn't want to make Frank angry. That was not a good idea.
So once rock and roll hit, once Bill Haley and the Comets came around and Elvis Presley was really going, how did that affect you guys?
Well, interestingly enough, we were kind of swept along in the whole rock and roll thing that was happening. Shortly after Elvis hit, Rick Nelson, who was our classmate at Hollywood High, began to record, and we recorded with him and we toured with him. So we were always considered while not hardcore rock and roll, very much part of that rock and roll generation. So I mean, we would in the public perception sort of get lumped in just as one of these new young rock and roll groups that are coming along these days. So we never felt like we were outside rock and roll looking in. We were always considered to be part of this new kind of music. And although, as I say, it wasn't hard rock, it had enough of a beat to it and a bounce to it that we were considered part of that genre.
The British invasion in the 60s, how did that affect you guys?
Well, that was sort of the beginning of the eclipse of our career. I remember the first time I heard the Beatles, I said, "Oh boy, this is a whole new thing." Then I saw their picture with the long hair and the British suits, and I thought, "Oh man!" Between the British invasion and Motown, both of which kind of came along around the same time, we really realized that we were getting overtaken by these new groups and this new sound and this little harder rock influence, and then that on top of the Motown sound really sort of began to diminish our popularity. And after 13 years, we all looked at each other, and we were all very ambitious guys and already were accomplishing success in some other fields of the industry, writing scripts and producing other artists and so forth. So we just took a look at each other after 13 years and said, we don't want to end up playing some Class C lounge in Bakersfield. Why don't we knock it off while we're still in pretty good shape? And so for 20 years, there were no Four Preps. The last record we made for Capitol before making that decision, we did a lot of satire. We'd satirize the newest fad in clothing. The granny dresses were popular. We did a song called Annie and Her Granny. Draft dodging was we did a song called Draft Dodge a Rag. Anything that was in the pop culture, we'd have fun with. So when the Beatles came along and started to get popular, we wrote a song called A Letter to the Beatles, which was just a satire of a little girl who writes a fan letter to the Beatles, and they write her back and say, "Send us $1 for a fan club card and a photo," and so forth. And it was climbing up the charts. We hadn't had a hit in 2 or 3 years, and this one was screaming up the charts with a bullet, really getting played all over the country, when Capitol Tower got a call from Brian Epstein in London saying, "We've heard the Beatles, the Four Preps' new recording, and we don't feel it's very respectful of the Beatles. We feel it cast them in a bad light, and we really rather you didn't continue to promote that record." So next thing we knew, Capitol had pulled our little record, Letter to the Beatles, off the market and destroyed all the copies. We actually got a letter from a woman in Sydney, Australia, who was the secretary at the Capitol distribution plant in Sydney, Australia. She came back from lunch one day with her girlfriends from the secretarial pool and was ordered to report down to the warehouse. When she walked in the warehouse, she and all her girlfriends were handed sledgehammers, and all over the floor of the warehouse were thousands of 45 records of our Letter to the Beatles, and they spent the afternoon smashing them all to smithereens so nobody could play the record anymore. So that sort of marked the end. So the Beatles, in more ways than one, were very much involved in our career, and I guess in the demise of it, if you will. So
you had just mentioned there a little bit that you guys stopped performing for about 20 years.
Yeah.
You guys got back together, and are you still performing now?
Oh yeah, well now in 2000 we disbanded in '69. In '89, the original Four Preps, our bass Ed Cobb, who had gone on to great success. He wrote a huge big rock hit called Tainted Love, another one called Dirty Water, and he produced a lot of hit records for other artists. But he and I were at a party in '89 with some of the other guys in the business, including some of the other original Preps, and we got up and sang a couple of songs just for the fun of it, and Dick Clark was there at the party and pulled me aside afterwards and said, "You're nuts if you don't put it back together again. I bet there's a lot of people out there would love to hear the Four Preps all over again." So in '89, one of the other original Preps and myself reformed the Four Preps with Jim Pike from the Letterman and David Somerville from the Diamonds. That was the foursome. We worked together for about 10 years, and then that group disbanded. A couple of the guys retired. Ed got ill and had to quit. And so in 2007, I put together the group that is currently the Four Preps with a couple of really strong veterans from other groups, a fellow named Bob Duncan, who for 20 years sang in the Diamonds, and two other fellows who sang in the Crew Cuts for years. And we're out. We do about 120 to 150 shows a year all over the world. And we did a PBS special called Magic Moments a couple of years ago, which gets played again and again and again, I'm happy to say. And that's really spread the popularity. And we've got a website, www.fourpreps.com is is our website, and we've got 30 or 40 videos on YouTube that keep cropping up from fans who put them up there. We've got a Facebook page. We've got our own website. And, this last year, 2011, we did, I think, 154 shows, and this year we'll do about 100, I think.
So what songs do you guys perform, then, with the veterans of the early days of 1950s?
Well, we do, as a tribute to the song we auditioned for that talent show with back then was by the Crew Cuts called Shaboom. So we do Shaboom, we do The Lion Sleeps Tonight, we do Little Darlin', we do Silhouettes. We, of course, do 26 Miles and Big Man, and so we do a lot of the early rock stuff that we're associated with from the mid-'50s, the other groups that the other fellas were in. It's just a walk down memory lane for a couple of hours.
And do you guys ever get into the Midwest area?
Oh, yeah. In fact, we're coming back to Chicago. I don't have my itinerary in front of me, but we're doing a couple of shows in Chicago in September, and then some in Ohio and Iowa sometime later in the year, I think October or something. Yeah, so we get back quite a bit there. Anybody that wants to check, just go to our website, fourpreps.com, and we have our performance schedule on there, so you can see if we're coming your way.
All right. Well, thank you very much for talking with us today, Bruce. That's Bruce Belland from the Four Preps.
Thank you, Nathan. It's been my pleasure.